discuss the Tomahawk missiles? Did you discuss
Well,
those?
we talked about it a little bit, didn't say much, but I do say to you, we need Tomahawks for the United States of America, too. We have a lot of them, but we need them. I mean, we can't deplete for our country. So, they're very vital. They're very powerful. They're very accurate. They're very good, but we need them, too. So I don't know what we can do about that.
Why do you think a second meeting with Putin? Why do you think a second meeting with Putin now will yield different results?
Well, I think Alaska actually set a stage, and that wasn't very long ago, but it set a stage. You have to understand, I came into this situation. I didn't start this war. This is a Biden deal, and I came into it, and it was a mess. It could have led to World War III. In my opinion, this could have led to World War III. That won't happen, but it could have. So I came in, this war was raging. When I left, this wasn't even a thought. For 4 years, nobody talked about it. I spoke to President Putin about Ukraine. It was the apple of his eye, but there was never going to be doing anything like this. And this all went because of some really bad decisions that were made. And look what you have. You have millions of people dead. You have just a horrible, horrible situation. I'm doing it to save souls. That's all I'm doing it for. I'm not doing it for us. We have an ocean between us. I'm doing it also to help Europe. They want to have it ended, but they're unable to do it. I'm able to do it. So I think we'll be successful. We'll save a lot of lives. It should have been done. Should have never started. This would have never happened if the election weren't rigged. I can't tell you that for so many years, even as I sat, everybody talked and talked and talked about it. It was not done, but now it was done with us. So I feel very proud to have been a part of it.
Алло, тебе уже рассказали про весь план пребывания там в Москве?
Thank you very much. It's an honor. We're going to have a continued, maybe a better relationship than ever before. So long. Bye.
Но если желание есть и возможность, я попрошу коллег, они организуют. Спасибо большое. И тебе хочу пожелать всего самого доброго в новом году, успехов.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to the 28th episode of Cold War 2.0 with our dear friend, historian, Dr. Tarik Cyril Amar. How are you doing, my friend?
Fine. How are you, Kevork?
I'm good. You watched the video of the Tomahawk strikes against Syria in 2017. And afterwards, the journalist of MSNBC was almost having a really good time about bombing another sovereign country and writing poetry is basically about the beauty, and he's guided by the beauty of the weapons.
Leonard Cohen. Cohen, of all people. Although Leonard Cohen was quite a mean Zionist, actually. A lot of people don't know this. It's tricky.
But what is this beautiful, game-changing weapon, Tomahawks, which we heard a lot in the past 2 weeks? The U.S. is going to supply Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles and not. Yes and no, yes and no. First of all, what is the weapon? And what could it mean for Russia? These two things. And afterwards, will Trump supply these weapons to Ukraine?
It's a cruise missile, so it's not a ballistic missile. It doesn't fly in a high arc, then hits its target. It flies more or less comparatively to a plane, and it flies usually very low over the surface of the Earth, which makes it hard to detect. It's actually quite slow. By standards nowadays, it's not a fast missile, actually. It's relatively slow, which means that although it's a dangerous weapon, that's true enough. It's a dangerous weapon, and the Russians have reasons to take it seriously. It is also a weapon that Russian air defenses, which are, I'm not saying this out of some sort of misguided sympathy, but which are among the best in the world. Everybody acknowledges that. Russian air defenses would probably shoot down many of them. I'm not saying they would shoot down every single one. That's a different issue, right? But it's not a missile that cannot be caught by air defenses, especially not especially if you're talking about Russian air defenses. They can. The other thing is that that one really should know is that it can carry ordinary explosives, what we often call conventional warheads, but it can also carry nuclear warheads, which makes it a very ambiguous and politically a very dangerous weapon. Because if a Tomahawk approaches you and your territory, at least in principle, you do have reason to be worried that it might, in the worst case, be armed with a nuclear warhead. Right? Now, I don't think that the Americans would give the Ukrainians nuclear warheads to put on their Tomahawks if it ever comes to that. But still, it's not a good thing. It's not a good look. It's destabilizing. It's escalating. And everybody admits that. Even Trump, in his own words, admits that using the Tomahawk, giving them to the Europeans, who would then give them to Ukraine, would be an escalation, right? So your final question, will Trump, in essence, this is his decision. Will Trump make the decision to hand them over to, in effect, in the end, the Ukrainians? 2 days ago, I would have simply said, I have no idea. And now I will say it's unlikely. It's unlikely now. And I'm not the only one. A lot of observers have picked up on the fact that the way that Trump has now talked with Putin, and we can speak more about the details of that talk as far as we know them, and the way also that he is treating Zelensky very badly again, actually, even now already, and what he has said about the US needing its Tomahawks itself, all of these are very strong hints that Trump, at least for now, has decided not to give them to Ukraine. I would like to add one last thing, which is, of course, this is a very, very concerning weapon. And if it were handed over to Ukraine, it would be, I've said it before, clear escalation. It would mean that Trump would finally totally become like Biden, and in a way even worse, even more aggressive than Biden towards Russia, But even if the US were to give the Tomahawks to Ukraine, every sensible person acknowledges that they are not a game changer. Once again, they look like a very powerful weapon. Each one individually is a powerful weapon, but their cumulative effect is by no means big enough and would never be big enough. The Russians have taken this position very clearly, and they're absolutely right about this, apart from the fact that they have a bias, but they're simply right about this. What the Tomahawks would do is they wouldn't change the course of the war, but they would escalate its risks enormously. That's what the Tomahawks would do, right? They wouldn't be able to change the course of the war. There's only one way that the Tomahawks could actually change the course of the war, and it makes people very afraid, which is if Russia retaliated against their use by Ukraine by attacking NATO territory, right? So Ukraine shoots Tomahawks at major Russian military installations deep inside Russia, maybe at Moscow itself, which is perfectly possible. They have that range. And then the Russians start attacking an airfield in Poland, a military base in Germany, and so on. I really don't think they would. I really don't think they would at all. I think what the Russians would do once again, and they've done it throughout this war. We've been here before with Western weapon system. They would tell us it's a great escalation. Please don't do that. It's a bad idea. And they're right. And then they would direct all their open retribution against Ukraine. And it would be terrible, but it would remain inside Ukraine. Open retribution. And I won't say more about this because it's easy to imagine that there's another level, right? And everybody understands that as well. Now, is that a reason to play with fire? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There certainly is a risk there.
Tarik, the Ukraine escalation, which started in February 2022, it's been almost 3 years now, more or less. And Ukraine has acquired all sorts of weaponry from Western governments, including the US. they haven't asked for Tomahawks, I believe. Like, I haven't seen the name Tomahawk is being repeated in the press as much as I have seen in the past 2 weeks. Like, I get the impression that every few weeks Ukraine has some brand new idea about the weapon which they certainly need this time. But beneath the surface, it also feels to me that there are military contractors wanting to deliver these weapons to Ukraine. And it's not about the equation in Ukraine. Ukraine is already lost war for the Ukrainians, unfortunately for them. So why the insistence now on a weapon which definitely will escalate the retaliation of the Russian side against Ukraine itself and not against a NATO country, as you already mentioned, which I totally agree with you. So in this case, Zelensky is not headed toward a peace process with Russia. He's only complicating the peace, which he says that he's ready to negotiate, at least for a settlement with Russia, right? Why now? The timing is really weird. I mean, when Trump and Putin are talking about ending this war.
I think that, look, as far as I know, I'm not absolutely certain of this. Now I'm thinking about it. But as far as I know, the Ukrainians have mentioned the Tomahawks in the past, but it never went anywhere. This is the first time that the West responds in any way, right? They were just off limits. And why is this happening now? I think there's one reason that has to do with the current situation directly, and another one is long-standing. And the long-standing reason is that Kiev has really only one chance of turning this war around in reality. There is one, and it's terrible. Kiev could change the course of the war if it expands into a large European war, much larger than now. I understand it's very large. I know many people have died, but believe me, it could be even worse, easily. So if Kiev manages to drag in NATO, at least in Europe, in other words, then Kiev may have a chance to turn the war around together with NATO. It may also lose, even that way, in which case NATO would be defeated as well, and this time directly and not indirectly, as it will be already. Yes. But I think in Kiev, this is what we need to understand. There are desperate and not very far-sighted people. We know they are not. They don't behave in a far-sighted manner. They never have. Who still cling to that idea that the way out for them is to dig deeper, to get the war to escalate beyond Ukraine and Russia, and beyond Ukraine and Russia in a direct form, so that the Poles come in officially, the Romanians come in, the Germans come in, right? Some of them are very eager already, that sort of thing, and ideally the Americans. I think this is hopeless. It's a hopeless idea, but I don't think they think it's hopeless in Kiev. I think they're a little insane about this. So that's one thing. Get the Tomahawk to create situations that perhaps, with a little bit of gambler's luck, finally enable you to escalate upwards, to open warfare between NATO and Russia. Open, not like now, half indirect. And the other, the not long-standing issue, the immediate issue is that the Ukrainians have been conducting their own air campaign in and against Russia, and that has targeted especially oil refineries. And these oil refineries, even Russia doesn't have an unlimited amount. I think it's under 70, something like 67 in the whole country, right? Something like that. And Ukraine has managed to damage quite a few of them, not half of them, they're not there. But they've damaged, I think, 15, 20, something like this, sometimes quite badly. And these are very complex, very strategic, very important installations. So that does hurt. That does actually hurt Russia. And they've been doing this apparently with long-range drones that they have themselves, and maybe by using their own ballistic, I think it's a cruise missile. I should know exactly, but they're Flamingo missile, right? Maybe, it's not quite certain. I believe that they want the Tomahawk to do more of that with even more impact. They believe in this oil refinery attack strategy. I also believe that although I believe that it has hurt Russia, I think there's some real economic impact. We can see this. But I also believe it's a dead end. because Russia will work its way out of this. They have by now worked their way out of any type of pressure we have put on them or the Ukrainians have put on them. And once again, even if Ukraine inflicts damage on the oil refinery system in Russia, as it has for a while now, this too will not change the war. But I believe these two hopes, those are the two hopes, escalating massively, maybe even to World War III, and expanding the oil refinery war. I think these two hopes have to do with the Tomahawk demand and discussion.
Now, Zelensky landed in the United States. He was not received by American officials, apparently, and he walked in one of the airports among the crew of the plane itself.
Yes.
I mean, this is a stark message, in my opinion, to Zelensky that these meetings are not going to go well, at least with Trump. But he says that he's going to meet with defense contractors and people who are specialized in energy, because Russia is hitting the energy infrastructure of Ukraine itself. Now, in this case, I think this is multifolded. Like on one hand, he needs weapons. On the other hand, he needs energy infrastructure in his country. I think he's stuck seriously in a vicious cycle of violence that is, as much as he repairs this energy sector and energy infrastructure, they will be easily hit because they are not like nuclear facilities in a bunker. They are in open air and they will be hit by Russian missiles. So the logical thing here to do is to pursue the diplomatic approach with the United States. That's why when I am listening to you, Tarik, and the argument and the theory or the argument that there are crazy people in the Ukrainian leadership who would wish for this war to go out outside the borders of Ukraine. At the same time, I'm really wondering that if Zelensky is not an independent actor in this case, he has superiors basically, on whose interest basically is for the flames of this war to be moving into other European countries, because Europe, it seems, very divided nowadays. There is vertical lines between different poles in Europe itself. Who benefits from such a war, in your opinion, if it spreads into other European countries?
Look, I mean, if there really was a large regional expansion of the war in Europe, and maybe even really a global expansion, which is then really very possible in such a scenario, of course, the vast majority of people will not benefit. Absolutely not, right? But as so often, as long as it doesn't become a totally apocalyptic, all-out nuclear war, even in such a terrible war, at the end, some people will probably turn a handy profit, right? This has happened in World War I. It has happened in World War II. I mean, in all the smaller wars, in quotation marks, somebody can make money, right? As long as it's not a total overkill. So I don't think there is a group of people who have a very specific, distinct, well thought out strategy where they're saying we want this war to escalate and then happens X, right? And we profit. But I do think there are a lot of people now in the EU and in NATO in Europe who are in love with the idea of a massive expansion of the military industrial sector. And that does have to do with profits. It has to do with stakeholders. It has to do with lobbyists. And these people are already profiting greatly. And I think there are people irresponsible enough, such as, for instance, to give you an example, the new head of the German land army, not the whole military, the land army, the Heer, a man called Freuding, who's completely insane to begin with. He really is, and he looks it. He's like out of Hollywood central casting, crazy German general. That's Freuding. And he has also spent the last 2 years or more in Ukraine, talking to the Ukrainians all the time. So he's gone more bonkers, right? Yeah. And under our brilliant new defense minister, Boris Pistorius, they took this guy. He's our Jack the Ripper, if people know Dr. Strangelove. They took this guy and made him the head of the single most powerful part of the German military, right? And he shows no sign of slowing up if you're following him. He's nuts. And these people, I think they would actually like to fight Russia.
Yeah.
They have, I think, developed the same illusion that the Germans had in 1941, which is that Russia is much weaker than it looks. And if only we knock it hard enough, we can actually topple it.
Mhm.
And they would probably end up in a similar way if they ever tried, right? It's a very bad idea, believe me. But I think they're real now. There are people again in Germany and in other states who think about a real war against Russia and how they could win it, actually, which they won't.
But how could they mobilize people, Tarek? Like in Germany, it has become like, for example, I mean, during wars, how governments mobilize their people? They use either nationalism or religion or ethnicity. They have to find something to mobilize the people and urge them to fight for a greater cause. But these things have been destroyed in Germany. So how would they encourage the people to fight?
I can't tell you how they would succeed doing it because I'm not sure they would. I hope they wouldn't. But I can tell you what they would try to do because they're showing us already. I don't have to speculate, right? Since 9th of September, I think, it was 9th of September, we had the first major incident. Non-incident, incident, nobody really knows, right? But since 9th of September, we have been under constant, I would call it propaganda or cognitive warfare, barrage about drone sightings and jet incursions and so on and so on. You all our new viewers, I think, are aware of this, so I will spare us the details. But that's a campaign. I'm sorry, but that's definitely a campaign. And we've had similar campaigns before. Populations in Europe, not in the US, that's not what they're doing right now, but populations in Europe have for years been prepped to be ready to go to war with Russia. And of course, if that ever happened, the story would be that we were attacked and that it was unprovoked. We would never admit any responsibility, and people would be heavily brainwashed to believe that this is a pure and just war of self-defense. This, I think, is the approach that would be taken. We can see it already in how they treat us. It's very, very clear. And would it work in the end? I don't know. We see polls in Germany where a lot of young Germans say they would actually not want to fight, even in a defensive war. So maybe it wouldn't work very well. Maybe the climate isn't just not appropriate enough. But don't underestimate war. Once war breaks out, people suffer, people die, people lose family members. And it has its own dynamic, right? One way you can make a people accept war is by getting it into war, so that people begin to feel they have to pay back the enemy for what they've already suffered, right? So I have no ability to predict anything here. I will tell you that I think all of this is an awful, horrific idea, but it's there. It's happening right now all around us, and I hope as a project it will fail. And that after this period of war scares and panic mongering, at some point we will finally return to some sort of normality. There's no guarantee. There's no guarantee.
I was just checking now, Tarek, the most recent poll in Germany by the Forza Institute. They came to the conclusion that only 16% of Germans would definitely be willing to defend their country with weapons in case of a military attack. And this is from August 2025. And this 16% probably mostly from the AfD. And because who's the nationalist, right? Who's going to fight for the country? And in this case, that would be really hilarious if the government would send people, like, because there's a crackdown on the AfD people to join the army and to join the police, right? They're not letting them to get into the police now. But the most crazy thing that I learned this week, and I heard basically, and sorry, but every week things become from dump to more dumper. And this is the Lithuanian defense minister. She says she wants to see a drone wall on the Russian border that look like something out of the Game of Thrones, she says.
It's better to have a very efficient defense system, be it drone wall or whatever we call it. I'd like to have, a wall that would look like in the Game of Thrones. That'd be great. But, well, this is reality.
Did you watch Game of Thrones? Did you watch Game of Thrones?
Nah, I
Okay.
tried, but I
Because
actually didn't like it that much.
because if you watched Game of Thrones and went to the last part of Game of Thrones, this wall has been taken down by a dragon.
One dragon. I've read about that. One dragon.
One
Yes.
dragon.
Look. I mean, the drone war, right, or as they call it now, the EDDI, the European Drone Defense Initiative. That's the new term, right?
Mm.
It's part of a 4-part plan. So they have this for the drones or the air domain. Then they have a special plan for space, right? And then they have a land plan, and the fourth one, I forgot what it is, but they have 4 components in which essentially, and this has just been discussed at a very important meeting, the EU suggests to splurge once again, like, with hundreds of billions in the end, of course, on various measures to build this sort of comprehensive super defense system against the threat from Russia, right? And as we discussed at the beginning, and as you pointed out, I mean, there it is really very easy to see the commercial motivations, right? Partly this is that the newer EU members, and that's just an objective fact, in the east of the EU, Poland, the Baltics are usually ahead. Finland now has also joined those. Are particularly belligerent, I would call it, and are particularly keen always on ramping up the escalation, the geopolitical escalation with Russia. And it's an initiative that partly comes from them, the drone wall as such, or the EDDI now. And that is now being sold to the rest of the EU. And of course, the rest of the EU, most of us will pay for it, right? That's how the new EU works. Look, Ursula von der Leyen in her last, the head of the commission, right? The despot of Europe, or as I call her, the American vice consul for Europe. That's what she really is. Ursula von der Leyen, in her State of the Union address, right, which is copied from the Americans, of course, right? About a month or 2 ago, I can't quite remember. She literally said that we have learned from our Baltic friends that we must do this. This is how the EU works now. The Baltic friends go to Ursula, the German, and say, we'd like to do X against Russia and also spend a few hundred billions. And she says, yeah, that's great. And sell it to the French and the Spanish and the Italians and all the rest of them. And then she does. And here's one interesting detail about this whole process as it's unfolding now, which I've observed. Now, we don't only have Ushi von der Leyen, and this brilliant Game of Thrones person from Lithuania. We also have Kaja Kallas from Estonia, yet another genius. And Kaja Kallas has recently come out and said, and that I found very interesting, even if the war ends, the need for defense will remain. And with the war ends, she means the specific war in Ukraine. So what that tells you is something obvious, but she let it slip, which is even if we fail to keep the war going, because that's what she wants. She wants the war to continue. But even if we fail to keep the war going, even then we will still spend all the money. That's basically what she's telling you.
Yep.
So you can see how persistent the interests involved here are, right? I mean, it's obvious.
Oh my God, Tarik, when we see this type of statements and when I hear it, I mean, if this was, let's say, 5 years ago, even 5 years ago, it would have been astonishing. It would have been so laughable, right?
Yeah.
But
They're
in
fast.
these last 5 years, it has accelerated so much that this type of people are in positions of power in almost every place. Defense ministers, head of the commission, foreign ministers. It's like, what is happening? Why is this decline in the intellectual status of these positions? You know, they have become mockeries for the people. Like usual people, normal people, ordinary people, normies, they're laughing at them. If they want to convince Germans or Lithuanians or French to go and fight, at least you need to have some literature to talk with them. How are you going to compare this drone wall to Game of Thrones and expect the people to go and fight? It's serious. I'm serious.
No, but it's very interesting. I totally agree with you. And I see it also in Ukrainian public space, because as your audience might know, I know Ukrainian and Russian well, and I follow Ukrainian public space from afar. And in Ukraine, what has been very popular throughout this whole war have been references to the Lord of the Ring, right?
Yeah.
Tolkien everywhere, all over the place. I mean, it's not his fault. Let's not blame Tolkien on that, right? People can now do with him what they want, and that's what they do in Ukraine. And they call the Russians orcs, and they have all these Tolkienish ideas about how this is this fight between good and evil, and the evil empire of Sauron, right? And I don't know if they see themselves as the hobbits or what's going on there exactly, but Tolkien is very popular. And so here you have Game of Thrones, which of course Game of Thrones, as far as I understand, is a bit of a modernized successor in some ways to Tolkien, right? It's from the same sort of genre and world building, right? And then you have companies, horrible companies, I think satanic companies like Anduril and Palantir, which take phraseology from Tolkien again, right? There is something going on where the worst ballicists and even the genociders in this world now are in love with fantasy. I'm not saying the opposite. I'm not turning it around. Please don't get me wrong. I've read the whole Lord of the Rings. I sort of liked it. I read some fantasy. I'm not saying everybody who likes fantasy is a murderer. I'm saying it's weird that a lot of militarists and even genociders are now abusing specifically the language of fantasy literature and TV and films to convey their messages. That's a very strange thing. But it's also ironic, right? I mean, historians will look back on our time and they will say, did nobody realize that when half of your elite starts talking in fantasy terms, maybe something is wrong with your link to reality, right?
Yeah. Guys, before we move to the next topic, which is correlated also to Ukraine, our dear friend Tarik Cyril Amar, as every week, he makes a special offer for the people who are watching this, or if you can send this link. This special offer is if you subscribe to Tarik's Substack, you will receive 20% off on your new annual subscriptions. And this is valid 2 days from now, which means till the end of the 19th of October. The link is scrolling on the screen. I have dropped it also in the live chat, and it is also attached in the description below. And as you're watching this stream, I just checked on the stream. We are now 410 people watching this live only on YouTube. And only 1/3 of you was generous enough to hit the like button or the thumbs up. I would really appreciate it, guys, as you watch. If you hit the like button, that's really helps this stream, and it also pushes it through the algorithm. And after we finish this live streaming, YouTube starts suggesting it in the suggestion list, so more people can discover this channel. I would really appreciate it if you simply just hit the like button as you watch. Tarik, we know now that there is going to be a meeting between Trump and Putin, and this time in Hungary. I truly want to go and ask you more about this potential meeting, but just before that, from the European Union leaders' side, or some of them, they say that the goal of Putin is to divide Europe. Some of us are with Ukraine and some of us not for supporting Ukraine, etc. But I see that if this was the goal of Putin, it has already been materialized. And not because of Putin, I think because of the craziness of the European Union of pushing this to the edge. And now we see there is a serious rift in the European Union countries that some of them do not want for this war to escalate, and they're going to host Putin and Trump in Hungary. So do you also see that Europe is already divided, that Putin doesn't have to divide it first? And what could we expect from such a talk, especially that it comes from someone who is considered the friend of Trump and Putin, like Orban?
Look, I mean, personally, right? I've been following the news on this very recent development, as we know, with the talk between Putin and Trump. I think it was yesterday, right? I'm getting confused, but it was yesterday.
Yeah.
And I've been listening a little bit to the Russian news as well, and how they talk about it and how they write about it. And my impression is that the fact that it's in Hungary is useful to all sides. Yes, and you're absolutely right that the thing about Orban, Viktor Orban, the leader of Hungary, is that he has a good relationship with Trump and MAGA, and he has a good relationship with Putin and Russia. And they don't like him in the EU, but they can't shake him off anymore, right? So that makes a lot of sense, simply, right? There's a minor technical problem, which is that Putin probably will have to fly on a very roundabout route to get there, but that's perfectly feasible. They're already discussing these routes, right? They sort of lead south and then back up north again. That's all easy to do if you want to. But I don't think Orban himself, I guess he wouldn't claim that. I don't think he would claim that he is a key figure here, right? He's a host, right? He's in a very useful position, and if this all happens, he will render a great service. But the key figures remain Putin and Trump, very obviously, in my view. And the big question is, could it possibly be a breakthrough, right? Look, the Alaska summit that happened about 2 months ago, right? A lot of people were, including me, impressed, very impressed indeed, by the way in which suddenly there seemed to be a real thaw between the United States and Russia, between also personally Trump and Putin, although they've always apparently respected each other on that level, and that things could move from there. And then we were all sort of disappointed, right? And let's not discuss who's to blame, but somehow things didn't rapidly develop towards a breakthrough. They didn't. However, at the same time, the Russians more than the Americans, but in the end, both sides always let us know that the process that was started in Alaska was not dead. Right? That was always there. We had several occasions where we were told, but you know what? We are still talking. We are talking quietly, but we are talking. So in a way, this is now the upshot. The Budapest meeting that they're planning is the upshot of what started at Alaska. In that respect, I agree with Trump. Not because Trump is so truthful, but because it's obvious. Yeah, this is one process still ongoing. Question is if it's going to be more successful this time round. What makes the Europeans and the bellicists in the US so angry is that Putin has already succeeded in one thing. He has most likely taken the Tomahawks off the table for now. If they were ever really on it, we don't know. But right now it's become, and Trump has been actually explicit about this, it's become very, very unlikely that the Tomahawks will be delivered anytime soon. Of course, in a broader sense, Putin has once again increased the distance between Trump and Ukraine, Trump and Zelensky. And we see the effect directly. I mean, we've talked about this before. It's really a triangle. Trump, Putin, Zelensky. And whenever Trump feels good about Zelensky, he actually increases the distance with Putin and starts complaining about Putin publicly. And whenever Trump feels better with Putin, he increases distance with Zelensky and starts humiliating Zelensky publicly, which is what he does to him, right? Slightly different on that side. So I know very smart people who say the Budapest thing cannot produce a breakthrough because their argument is that this very personalized symmetry, right, between the big guys getting together is simply not prepared enough and not systemic or systematic enough. I disagree. I don't think we can be sure either way. It is certainly naive to expect that when the great leaders meet, miracles must happen, right? That Alaska showed us that that's not how it works.
Yes.
But I think it's also wrong to think that breakthroughs cannot happen. They can. They can. There could be a fast development. And it depends. Remember what happened at Alaska. People have already forgotten this, but it wasn't just optics. There was a moment where the Americans said, we have a proposal for the Russians. Nobody ever told us what it was. The details were not revealed. And the Russians, Peskov, Putin's speaker, among others, told us, you know what, we find it, and that's the word used, acceptable. acceptable. So there was a moment at Alaska where it really concretely looked like this isn't just shaking hands. They're talking about something specific they can get done together to end this. All of this may have developed further behind the scenes, and there might then be, on the basis of that, a sudden breakthrough in Budapest. I would hope so. I'm not predicting it, but I think it's possible. It's possible.
So they're going to meet next week, or is it scheduled later?
Trump has said, and I think it's the only thing we've heard about the schedule for now, Trump has said in 2 weeks or so. And somebody, I think, on a French channel has pointed out rightly, I think this guy was right, that Trump says 2 weeks when he really doesn't know. It's his way of saying, oh, sort of soon, but not tomorrow. That's Trump's 2 weeks.
Soon, like the inshallah of Trump. Soon, inshallah.
Yeah, right.
But have you seen the German government's reaction to this? They're asking now. The German government asks Hungary to arrest Putin in Budapest. They say a German government spokesperson said Hungary is obligated to arrest Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is under International Criminal Court arrest warrant, if he attends a summit with the US President Donald Trump in Budapest.
Yeah, that comes from the same government that is led by Friedrich Merz, right? And Friedrich Merz, the first thing he did after he was elected, literally the first thing is, or not after he was elected or after they voted him through in the Bundestag, in the parliament, the first thing was to say, I'm inviting Bibi Netanyahu, my great friend, publicly. And at that time, Netanyahu was already under an arrest warrant by the ICC, the International Criminal Court. And I will be very blunt here. I've had it. These two people are not comparable. Putin has waged a war. The war is a war of aggression, which is what the Americans and various NATO Europeans did to Iraq in 2003 as well. It was de facto a NATO war, even if NATO wasn't officially in the lead, right? The coalition of the willing, 2003, that attacked Iraq was essentially a piece of NATO, and a big one attacking, right? That was a war of aggression under false pretexts. You can argue that the attack of February 2022, and I have argued that, and the Russians live with that because they're not that complicated, they're fairly honest often. You can argue that that was a war of aggression. They will not share your opinion, but I would argue that. But you know what? Those happen. Those happen. And the West is in no position to complain anymore. We have wrecked international law first, not the Russians. Not the Russians.
And that war was 10,000 kilometers away from the United States.
If you ask beyond the legal criteria, who had more substance to argue that they were forced into this, it's Russia. I'm not talking about the legal side now, I'm talking about the political side. Politically, Russia had more arguments than the West attacking Iraq. Let's leave this here. Now we've had a genocide. An Israeli genocide in which many Western states, the US and Germany included, have been accomplices, and a genocide that might restart every day, And that's the context in which there is a warrant for Bibi or for Netanyahu. God, I forgot his real name. That's terrible.
Bibi. What was his real name? His real name is Milkovsky. What was it?
Yeah, of course, Milkovsky. But anyhow, okay, Netanyahu. So I'm sorry, but I'll say it. Putin and Netanyahu are not comparable in my book. They're not.
Yeah.
If I want to see one person in court, it's Netanyahu, not Putin. I'm sorry if they don't like hearing this in Berlin. But the same government whose chancellor, the same German government whose chancellor has shown absolute disregard for international law when it comes to Israel committing a genocide, can basically go jump in the lake trying to tell me anything about the application of international law. I'm not interested.
You know, as you speak about the Gaza, let's maybe update what is going on the peace front there, since Trump says that he ended the war which was ongoing for 3,000 years. And he single-handedly ended this war in Gaza, and he established peace. I think I would like to know two things from this issue. One of which, how do you see this so-called peace agreement? And I would like to share, in my opinion, this is worse than the Oslo Accords in the
Yes,
90s, and this
it
will
is even
definitely lead into, like, if it's implemented as they wish, it will lead into complete annihilation of the concept of Palestine state. Like, we're still speaking about the bare minimum, and that is two-state solution, let alone a one-state solution that gives rights for everyone. And the second thing is, how do you perceive the Merz sitting the last row near the banana tree? And completely, people say this is the position of Germany now, completely irrelevant.
It is. Look, the Germans, I'm sorry, I am a German, right? And I really wished it was different. But the Germans, if we can generalize, the government, the elites, right? They really have only themselves to blame. Our so-called allies and a state that is extremely dependent on us, which is Ukraine, committed one of the worst eco-terrorist acts of war and terror attack in one thing in peacetime against our vital infrastructure. That was Nord Stream, September 2022. And we helped with the cover-up as long as we could. And now that we finally want to go after some of the perpetrators, the Ukrainians, and I tell you they were not alone, right? And we are still shying away from the other ones. We are being spat in the face. The polls are very clearly telling us we give a damn, and we are not going to help you to actually conduct normal judicial procedures because we think that the guys who blew up your pipeline, they deserve decorations. A Polish high official actually said that to German officials. We think these guys don't deserve prosecution. They deserve decorations. Donald Tusk, Prime Minister of Poland, has told the Germans repeatedly, basically at least twice, shut up. Basically, shut up, keep quiet. And he's also told them to apologize. So the country that got bombed, and I'm sure with the help of Poland, I'm absolutely sure by now, is supposed to apologize to the bombers, right? Just to be clear. Now, this is only part of how we have been dealing with our so-called allies and how we have been behaving as a state, not we personally, all of us. It's also how we have taken the tariffs lying down from Donald Trump. There's no respect left for us, nowhere. There's no respect in the West because we don't stand up for our national interests at all. And I'm not a nationalist, but I've had enough. I've said this before. And the second thing is there's no respect outside the West. And there's no respect outside the West because we've sided with Israel. Like few other states, we've been among the worst accomplices of Israel during this genocide. Nobody respects us anymore. And that's what you get. That's what you get. We are being publicly humiliated in the figure of our high representatives. That's what we get here. And to your other question concerning what is this really, this so-called ceasefire, right? I agree with you. It's worse than Oslo 1993. It's worse again. But I want to say one thing, and I know I'm repeating myself. I don't want to criticize what the Palestinian resistance does because that's not my business. And I'm not in their shoes. You know, there may be situations when somebody is committing genocide against your people where in the end, your decision is to take a very bad deal because you have to, right? And only these people can decide that. That's one thing. But if you look at it from outside, it's a terrible so-called deal. It's not a deal. It's not a peace agreement. It's a diktat. Everybody got together except the Palestinians and decided what's going to happen. Maybe we've talked about this before, but you remember that slogan? The Ukrainians actually are saying it again now. Nothing about Ukraine without Ukrainians. That means no decisions about Ukraine without Ukrainians at the table. Oh, really? What about the Palestinians? The whole first 21, then 20-point plan was developed explicitly without Palestinian input. And then it was presented to them. And that's called a diktat. That is literally a diktat. And of course, it stands in the old colonial tradition, right? Once again, they're being treated the way colonizers from the North and West have always treated their victims. It's very, very clear. And the Israelis, of course, who are the genociders, are getting away and are being handed a so-called victory. Trump was explicit about this, instead of being punished. Of course, they need to be punished and deterred. And, it would be best they just would be forced to leave. Frankly, it's enough now. It's enough, right? But this perversion is obvious. This is a terrible, terrible deal. Now, here is the other complication. As we know, Hamas, when they answered the deal, you know this too, but maybe we should repeat it for our audience, they really only answered 6 points. They were presented with a diktat of 20 points, and they were told, this is it, take this. And they only ever answered about 6 of them. They didn't talk about the other 14. And the other 14, for instance, include the crazy demand that they should disarm. Right? So they never agreed to that. The impression that is now given in Western media that Trump has given, he's lying or he's just plain wrong again and confused. Hamas never agreed to disarm. They didn't. They actually did not agree to disarm. What will happen next? What will we really see? The Israelis are already cheating. They always cheat. It's the pattern. We've seen this at least since 2000 and before. When Israelis say we are lifting a blockade, the blockade comes back. And they're already rebuilding the blockade. They have already found pretexts to let only half of the aid through and even less, to stall, to make it slow. Everything is already happening. The Israeli defense minister, Israel Katz, has already let us know that he's met with his military to plan the continuation of the war. And since the Israelis never keep their word, and I mean this literally, never, you won't find a single instance of Israel keeping its word. Since they never keep their word, there is a probability that they will say at some point, the remaining hostages, no, not hostages, captives. These were actually captives, definitely. The remaining captives that Hamas held are out. We have them back, dead and alive. And now we will wage war again. We will starve them again. We will commit the genocide again. We don't know if that's the scenario. I'm not sure this will happen, but it is certainly something that some very powerful Israelis want to do. Exactly that. Lie again, as they always do. If it's not as bad as that, then we are in this sort of gray zone area, right, where we will be probably for quite a while, where there is this ongoing complicated interplay, right? The Israelis try to get Trump on their side. Trump says loud things, but maybe doesn't fully act on them. Hamas preserves its assets, and other resistance organizations preserve their assets. They're not alone. Then there's a complicating factor, Hamas, Fatah or PLO relationship. All of this is still going on, right? One thing is clear. If anybody thinks that this is really the beginning of a new Middle East, like Trump is dreaming or pretending, they have no idea what they're talking about. That is definitely not what's happening here.
I mean, definitely a new Middle East, but not the type that they are preaching.
Yes. In the sense of a better Middle East, where Israel is finally forced to behave as if it's not a maniacal, genocidal, mass murderer state, which it is. No, that's not yet happening. I hope it will happen in the future, but that's not yet happening.
But Tarik, now this is an ironic question, of course. I hope people get the irony here. I will show you an interview which Die Welt has done with the deputy foreign minister, apparently of Stellvertreter of Israel. And she says, I'm quoting her now in German, in jedem zweiten Haus in Gaza fanden wir Mein Kampf von Hitler. In English, in every second house in Gaza, we found the My Struggle or Mein Kampf of Hitler. So how would Israel pursue peace with people who in every two...
That's the point. No, that's the point. She's laying the groundwork for not sticking to the peace. That's what they're doing. They're already prepping us. And the Welt is, of course, helping. Welt is an ultra-Zionist outlet, right? They're prepping us for being ready to support them again in the next phase of the genocide, right? This is just one piece of anti-Palestinian dehumanizing propaganda, as they've been using it from the beginning of all of this. And of course, it's a lie. Of course it's a lie. It's a lie like this 40 beheaded babies, the babies in the microwaves, the systematic mass rape. These were all lies.
But
It's
the
a
light and the
lie.
Hasbara were more sophisticated in the past, Tarek. Now they don't put efforts in coming with creative ideas because the media is not challenging them, right?
That's one thing. And I think I can't really, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what's happening in that realm. I think they've become very primitive because they have had it so good in the mainstream media, and they don't know what to do about the social media yet, the alternative ones, at least. I think some of them, as we know, want to make an effort, and they're pumping money into this now. We do know that, Clock Tower and all these operations, right? So we will see what will happen. But as of now, my sense is that Israel hasn't cracked the alternative media code. They look helpless. They look rich and helpless, right? But let's see. They're terrible people, and they're unfortunately very fanatical, and they will keep going at this, and we should resist it. But this is just more dehumanizing propaganda to fuel a next stage of genocide. That's what this is in Welt. But, I mean, imagine it. We don't know exactly, but the vast majority of buildings in Gaza does no longer stand, right? Where did they find all these Mein Kampf books? Like they were digging them out of the rubble they made?
I will show you. Can
what
you
is
wait?
this bullshit?
I will wait, Tarek. Look, this is the post on the Twitter X account, right? Of Die Welt, and I just want to show you a few things because yesterday, as I lost sleep, I went through the comments. And you start with these comments. People are literally not buying it in every sense of the and those are not Arabs. They are Germans. Like this person says, welche Häuser, which houses that you do find from here.
What are you talking about?
It goes and goes and goes, hundreds of comments, and you really struggle to find one comment that is like in support of this or believing this Hasbara and complete lie, fabricated lie, you know.
Yeah.
So they're losing the narrative also in Germany. I don't know how much effective and impactful that is on the outcome of this conflict in Palestine, but it seems they don't care about putting some effort in coming with some believable lies, you know.
It might also be that they've reached what I would call an objective limit. You know, I mean, there is you can lie a lot, but you cannot ultimately completely pervert reality and get people to believe it because reality is accessible, it's visible. The Gaza genocide has been visible, even though they tried to block us out, but it's still been visible in large parts. It's the most visible ever genocide in history, I would argue, at least while it was taking place already and might be taking place again, right? So there is a way in which, and that's only one aspect, their behavior towards Lebanon, Syria, all of these things, you know, if you follow it, it's very clear. The assassinations, the reckless strikes at negotiators, the habit of constantly killing those that you invite to talk to you, all of these things are there. And we could go on and on and on. Israel's tactics, I think it's fair to say, do rely on being in the dark. I don't mean this in a mystic sense. I mean this in a very concrete sense. Israel's tactics rely on not being transparent. And the more they become visible, the weaker they get. This is by no means over. Don't mistake me for an optimist. This is not over. But there is something that's happening to their capacity to mislead most of humanity. I think most of it is gone, and I think it will stay gone.
Tarik, thank you so much again for your very valuable insights into these complex issues that we discussed today, from the Tomahawks, from the peace talks between Putin and Trump, into the Gaza mayhem, basically the onslaught, which is still ongoing, and Israel is killing Palestinians every day in the Gaza Strip.
Yes.
I'm really grateful for having this weekly conversation, just like the hundreds of people who watched today on Syriana Analysis live, and thousands will watch this later. So also thank you so much, guys, for tuning in and watching these streams weekly. We do this with our dear friend Tarik every Friday at 5 p.m. Central European time, 11 a.m. Eastern American time. In 2 weeks, we will change the time zone. So I don't know what will happen, but I will definitely update you. Next week, we will definitely do follow-up on Friday. So stay tuned for that. If you like this stream, the easy thing to do is to hit the like, thumbs up, subscribe to Syriana Analysis, and if you want to go further and support this independent work, you can become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. The link is also in the description below. And if you don't like to use Patreon, there are different other means also in the description below. Just final thanks to our friends Kevork for gifting Syriana Analysis membership, Rami for the super chat, super sticker, and also our friend Take the Red Pill Now. He's giving us a red pill now. Thanks, gentlemen. More need to hear these views. We will definitely do that, my friend. Thank you so much for your generous support, guys. Peace be upon you, upon your families.